Hi everyone, it's QuickyBaby and welcome back to World of Tanks, and specifically welcome to my look at Art of Strategy, which is a re-skinned version of the game mode that Wargaming were testing out on the Sandbox test server last year, which was called Order of War. So Order of War has now become Art of Strategy, and pretty much all of the features that were included in the video that I released in January of 2021, where you managed to assimilate vehicles, and back then you could only go 1 versus 7, where 1 player played as the strategist and 7 players played tanks, just like you do on the regular game mode of World of Tanks against that 1 player. Now, Wargaming have also added in an addition to the Art of Strategy, and that is that you can play 1 versus 1, where each commander is controlling 7 tanks. You have to make a squad from tier 10 vehicles. There are class-based limitations about the kind of vehicles that you can take, so don't think you can just take 7 artillery, as there's only 1 artillery slot. But if you don't have any artillery, then you could always put a tank destroyer in there instead. Now, in addition to creating a squad of 7 vehicles, what you are also going to be able to do is place defensive structures if you're playing as a strategist across the map. And last year, there was only a gun turret, a machine gun turret, and a watchtower. Now they've added 3 new other defensive structures: AT guns, flamethrowers, and MRL, which are rocket launchers. Now, just to break it down for you, AT guns, pretty darn good at going through medium tanks, light tanks, and your more lightly armored heavies. They do 300 damage a pop, and they fire quite rapidly with pinpoint accuracy of 0.15. Flamethrower traps ignore armor, and they have the same burning effect on vehicles. So that's really good for slowing down a heavy or even catching a medium or a light tank ill prepared. But they are incredibly short range, and so unless you can use them as an ambush position, then they're quite hard to make work. The gun turret is a huge behemoth gun that can sit at the back of the map and deal up to 1,000 damage and has a large amount of durability. MG turrets are kind of these burst machine guns that are good for light tanks and mediums. These new MRL rocket launchers, as we're going to be seeing in the gameplay today, are pretty much the equivalent of 6 artilleries all firing at the same time, and just check out what kind of damage we're going to be able to deal with them. Watchtowers are the same as previously, where they're very vulnerable, they're very stealthy, but they provide a large amount of view range, either for your tanks or alternatively for all of your other defensive structures. Now, the positions that you can place them on the map are predetermined, so I guess after a long time, people are going to be able to figure out roughly where they are and maybe even blind fire those positions. But there really is a good amount of flexibility about where you can place the guns to try and build up your own kind of strategy. But really, apart from the 3 new structures, none of that is really new. And the only thing that Wargaming have really added is this garage scene of 1 gentleman about to meet their adversary on the battlefield. So why don't I just jump in and show you what it's all about. So as you load in, this first 1 minute is incredibly important about setting up your vehicles. Here we can see that I'm taking 80 guns, I'm packing 2 flamethrowers, and I'm getting a rocket launcher as well. Now I'm putting my 80 guns, as you can see on the map, here, here, and here, which will be able to protect the western flank, and 2 protecting the middle of the map, and 1 also protecting the eastern flank. I'm putting my rocket launcher at the back, I'm putting my flamethrowers in an ambush position here, and I also believe an ambush position that we can see right in the middle of the map. And now what you see me doing is deploying my vehicles. And after you've managed to actually get all of your vehicles deployed, if you click the battle button, then you're actually able to start giving them pre-orders. So I thoroughly recommend that you use that first minute to be able to try and not only deploy everything, but also decide where you want to move all of your units as well. So I'm going to use a 60 TP over on the west of the map as a bit of a block. I'm going to move my Kranvang up into a hold down position where it's going to be able to get some shots in. I'm going to start to move my TVP up towards the hill, and I'm moving my Badger, as we can see, back here. Now, one of the cool things that Wargaming have added is they've actually added in that you can turn your tanks as you move them by holding down the right mouse button, which is actually incredibly useful. Also, we can see that Wargaming have got a bunch of extra features where you can have different stances that your vehicles are in. You can either have this kind of like all-round flexible stance, you can either have a defensive stance, or alternatively one which is more inclined to scouting. Now, what you're seeing here is that while I can play all of my different tanks in that kind of RTS version of the game, I can also go and I can look at the enemy tanks, or I can assimilate one of my vehicles and then play it in the very traditional World of Tanks functionality. And there we can see immediately those MRL rockets coming from the back of the enemy team. It'd be really nice if I could spot them because they only have 100 health. And take a look, we can actually see what my guns are doing there. We can see that they're actually able to do some very substantial damage. We managed to get some good spotting there with the TVP. So now that I've got my TVP up on the hill, I'm going to switch instead to the Kranvang, and I'm hoping that I'm going to be able to get some shots through the side. But unfortunately for me, it looks like the bots on the enemy team are actually aiming pretty well there, and I'm unable to be able to get the IS-7 at all. So instead what I'm going to do is I'm going to switch to the TVP, and I'm going to go and try and crit a crossfire. Now, one thing you might be interested in is about the consumables, the ammunition. In the previous version, Order of War, or whatever it was called, you could actually decide what kind of ammunition you were going to take on your vehicles. Unless I'm mistaken now, every single ammunition that the vehicles take are high explosive anti-tank or APCR premium rounds, is what I'm trying to suggest. And I don't seem to have to pay for it in the post-game stats. Otherwise, I can tell you, this would end up being probably one of the most expensive game modes ever. You can imagine what 7 vehicles, all using premium consumables, only firing premium rounds would cost. I wouldn't be surprised if it ended up being something stupid, like having, you know, 500,000 or 1 million credits per battle. Alrighty then, so we can see that the enemy team, or shall I say, the enemy strategist, is pushed, so weird to be talking like that, is pushing their Super Conqueror and their 60p through. I'm sitting here with my flamethrower, just seeing if I can get ready and prepare. And you'll see that I missed one of the shots on the side of the Super Conqueror. Also, if you're looking at this new reticle, I'm not going to talk about it in great depth now. I might do a follow-up video on it, but all you need to know is that Wargaming are testing this new kind of overlay, which gives you an idea of how much of the tank you can actually see. Incredibly useful stuff. But I'll talk about it in a different video. I want to talk about the art of strategy here. So talking about the art of strategy, I found out that the side armor on that gun turret is not very good, but the front is. And I just realized that thing's got a weak point on top that I probably should have started to try and fire at after I no longer had the side of the vehicle. So we can see that my flamethrower turret really is starting to hunger after the 60 TP. Looks like the enemy strategist decided to try and aim at my weak point. I'm pretty sure that was not a bot, but that was him actually micromanaging it. While my 60 TP is reloading, I was thinking about going and taking a look somewhere else in the map, but then I thought to myself, well, I can probably get the reload on this player, and if I can manage to start to pick them apart, that's really going to help. So this Art of Strategy game mode, what it is all about is, in my opinion, getting your bots into positions where they're not going to get themselves killed, and then micromanaging each of the individual bots as effectively as you can, switching between them. So you'll see that I went up on the hill, I fired off my TVP bag, and now when my 60 TP has finished reloading, then I'm instead going to start to engage their 60 TP. And so it is actually really fun for any of you out there who have got, should we say, good reactions, or you've got kind of the mental capacity to be able to handle multiple tanks at the same time. It is pretty wild to switch between vehicles, you know? I was fighting a 60 TP. I used my TVP on the enemy team, my team, to be able to engage the gun turret on the enemy team. Then I switched to my Kranvang to see if I could get any opportunity. Then the 277, as he came around the corner, got absolutely obliterated by my Badger. And because I was micromanaging the 60 TP there, we're actually able to stop taking any more damage after that first awful shot that I took and be able to handle it. Alright, talking about damage. We've got a Badger on the enemy team right below me, and he's managed to miss. I'm going to try and dump out a mag. I only managed to put 1 of 3 shells in. From above there, the heat rounds are actually pretty strong, because the Badger's armor is a lot like most tanks are, angled like that, and from above, it's not nearly as effective as it is when it's on the flat. So it looks like the enemy's rockets, I'm not sure if you can manually decide where to fire them. I haven't been able to figure that out. Actually just whiff over the turret of the Kranvang, and he could just stay put. We've actually just used the TVP here to find out where one of the flamethrowers is on the enemy team, and I'm going to make my way over, and just to get rid of them and also to get rid of it from being able to spot me, we can see that we are able to pick that flamethrower's hit points apart very quickly, putting all 4 rounds from the TVP. Now we're going to switch to the Badger. when I was actually playing, the Badger, the reason why I paused there with the commentary is the Badger actually had a bit of audacity. He said, "Oh, I haven't seen you in a while, Commander," like this, but in the replay it didn't actually do it twice. So that was kind of quite cute. Almost as if the AI is kind of like rubbing it in that you haven't been micromanaging all of them individually. And this was my second ever game that I played of this game mode. Well, the second one of the new year. I haven't played. This is the second game I've played since we first got to try it on the Sandbox test server in 2021. And I can tell you, look at how useful this is going to be, by the way, with the new overlay. Look at that. I can actually find out where the shot is of the Object 430U. But unfortunately for me, well, actually, I should say fortunately, the 430U on my team manages to shoot the 430U on the enemy team before I was able to get that shot in from that Grand Vong. But yeah, stay tuned. I'll be having my full opinion on that new kind of overlay system very soon. All right, so this Grand Vong, we managed to get the 430. I think I alt-tapped there to probably check something. I feel like I'm pretty secure in on this battle now, as I have pretty much 4,000 hit points more than the enemy, and I've managed to take out one of their big guns. And we can see that that 80 gun is starting to do well. Dang, look how useful that hidden... Look how useful it was to be able to see where the ridgeline was against that IS-7. Man, that's kind of borderline OP in my opinion. Again, stop talking about it, even though it's going to be definitely one of the most crazy things about the patch. All right, so in this kind of a situation, it's really just... It feels so easy to be in control of all the tanks. It really does. When I can take risks because I'm in control of my vehicle, I know that if I die, I'm still going to be able to win the battle because I can assimilate the Badger, and I know that my Badger isn't going to be useless. So it's really weird. If you're a great player of World of Tanks, you'll probably have quite a lot of anxiety towards the latter part of the game, of dying maybe more than you should, or shall I say, dying when you shouldn't, even in a game which looks like it's almost guaranteed to be won. And accordingly, you'll sometimes end up losing games because you made a risky play to try and maybe get some more experience or get that extra kill. And then it doesn't work out for you. And then your team managed to throw almost a certain victory. Well, if you're a great player, it's almost impossible when you've got the advantage for the enemy team to truly come back into this, as long as you keep the micro going and you keep trying to focus on the individual vehicles. I thought I'd talk a little bit about the AI. I'm actually kind of impressed with what Wargaming have been able to do with the AI. As you can see, this Badger at the back of the map is doing some very substantial damage by itself. And the Grand Vong, well, I wasn't expecting it to be turned around that way, but I can't really keep control of what the AI is doing at least all times. And we can see the MRL artillery on the enemy team. They're nearly able to get those shots on that Grand Vong. I think it'll be a bit dodgy if you can't really tell your artillery where to fire. Otherwise, if it's AI controlled, it might end up just not really doing too much in that kind of a scenario. All right, so we've got the Badger locked down, going to come around the corner. The AT gun on my team manages to get 2 kills quickly at the end, and that was it. Good night to the enemy strategist. We won with over half of our hit points left, only losing a single vehicle. Alrighty, so let's load into a next one. And in the previous round, which was the second game that I played, I wasn't playing against the best of players. Now, this was the first game that I played, at least in 2022, and I'm playing against a player who has 55% win rate on their service record across their account. I can tell you, somebody who's got 55% wins in World of Tanks, they're a half-decent player. They are a contender, and if you don't take the game seriously, they are going to make fun of you, at least the majority of the times. So you'll see that I'm way slower with deploying my tanks and with deploying all of my my watchtowers and my turrets, and I'm using the big gun. So I decided in this one that I'm going to be using 2 of the machine guns, 3 towers, and the big gun, so that you can be able to see the effectiveness of all 3 different types of the turrets. And I've got screenshots as well, so I'm going to be able to show you how much damage they all managed to do. So we're going to be rolling out on Ghost Town here. And immediately we can see, of course, I'm going to send my heavy tanks towards the town. I'm going to send my TVP and my Grand Vong and my E50M out. And man, I'm slow. And this shows you just how important it is to have that micro early in the game so that you can deploy all of your structures and get your units moving forwards, because I have been oh so slow. But in my defense, this was the first time I played all year, and trust me, if it does look absolutely alien, honestly, if you've played other RTS games, you know, you've played your StarCraft, you've played your Command and Conquer, you should be able to pick it up fairly quickly. And we can see that the enemy strategist, who clearly has assimilated the bat chat in this situation, has actually managed to get into it fairly quickly. So I'm thinking maybe I've got a bat chat that's isolated, but look at the disaster that's happening right now. Currently my E50M is getting absolutely clapped in those bushes. I'm not sure if it was all the artillery barrage that managed to get me, but I decided to take the fight to the enemy team as aggressively as I could. So I'm going to get into position with my TVP. I'm going to put 1 shot in, 2 shots in, don't manage to hit the 3rd. I'm going to start reloading my TVP, and then I realize, why don't I take over the Kranvang now? With a bit of miss micro before I managed it. And then how cool is that? Now I can manage to take over the Kranvang. Wonderful stuff. Unfortunately for me, it looks like the enemy strategist is playing very aggressively against me, and he's sent 3 vehicles up here. And while it looks like my gun turret managed to do a paltry 45 damage to the SDB-1, I'm just sacrificing my Kranvang while I'm getting my shots in with my TVP. And I locked the SDB-1 in place there, which will hopefully work out well for me. I made a terrible misplay with leaving my E50M, but did you see that? Our gun turret just managed to hit that SDB-1 for, I think, 600. So absolutely wild stuff there. So I've lost my E50M, I've lost the Kranvang, but I have managed to deal with 2 tanks on the enemy team. And we can see that they're pushing quite aggressively along this western part. So I get Amaraked with the very first shot that I take. This player is clearly micromanaging the 430U with the way that it's turning towards me. This is clearly not AI, at least for me, in my opinion, right now. So we can also see, our minigun there, our machine gun that we can see towards my left, ended up absolutely clapping the side of the 430U. But unfortunately, the AI is managing to clap me as well in this situation. So as long as I don't low roll here, all I need to do is really pen like 1 shell or 2 shells. And spoilers, I'm going to completely mess this up. Completely mess this up. And this is where I realized, like, this player is not a slouch. He's face-hugging me perfectly. He's going to the left, going to the right, turning. And honestly, I should have just fired towards the top of his turret there. So big misplay by me. And I'm now down a vehicle. Although I am up on hit points, at least. So here's one of the things that I want you to figure out about this. Maybe you screwed up. But it is so satisfying to come back, it really is. It's kind of a bit like respawning in front line. Just because you mis-microed that one engagement and I lost a 1v1 against a 430U, albeit that he was down to, what, about 20 or 40 hit points or something stupid like that. But it is kind of fun that, okay, Tom Reeds on the enemy team here is the strategist, spoilers, it's his anonymized name, got the better of me in that fight. But maybe I can manage to come back into this battle, and that's what's awesome. And that's definitely one of my favorite things about it, is that it feels that while each engagement is significant because of this kind of 7-tank atmosphere, they're not so significant that the battle is lost as soon as one vehicle is down. It is very weird to be playing on these big maps. Undoubtedly, Ghost Town is a big map. And to be playing with only 7 tanks, half a team, it's even less than in ranked. And ranked feels sparse at best. To only have 7 vehicles on here definitely feels as if it doesn't really truly fill up the map. So I've decided that it looks like that Tom Reed's on the enemy team. It's going to be so weird that we're going to be able to, are we going to call them the strategist? Or when we know that we're playing against a single player, do we name them individually, you know? Probably have to name them individually in future videos when I think about it, that Tom has decided to invest his tanks all the way down the west, which is unfortunate for me because I put my big gun turret over towards the east. But we should also probably take a moment to appreciate that that gun turret right there managed to actually hit their STB-1 probably about 700 or 800 meters away. So it really shows you that those turrets and the lines of fire that they can create are of the utmost importance. Okay, so while Tom has got the best of me with regards to his position up on the west, what I'm going to do now is I'm going to get my Badger into position. Now I'm going to start to poke out a little bit with my 277. And I'm also going to consider about what I can do with my Object 430U, and that's really going to be my powerhouse. My plan is to use my 430U to retake the western position, and then if I can manage to control the high ground, well, I should be okay. Because it looks like Tom is just leaving his WZ-111-5A, his Badger, his Super Conqueror, his 113, all in that western position. So unless he's doing some kind of counterplay and either making his way over towards the east, or alternatively he's amassed his whole team up here, then we should be good. And oh dear, there we go. There's the WZ-111-5A that appears. So immediately I know that now it's likely I have to deal with a 430U and a WZ-111-5A up in this position. Now, can you imagine the micro between managing two tanks that only have like about a 6-second reload? That would be pretty wild to do. But you know what, I don't really feel like you have to do that, so to say. It's probably best if you just try and get one of the vehicles into position and just focus on playing with the other. So we managed to spot out the 113. We're going to start to get them shot, and I feel like this is a sitter of a shot, so I've got to try and take it. Unfortunately, it reveals my position, which also makes me think that that Super Conqueror and that 113 really didn't have the best of view ranges. I was really surprised that the 430U was still hidden in that scenario. Shows you how important camo rating will be. I can imagine it's going to end up being very important inside this game mode, especially in the AI situations, because your AI isn't going to be thinking about driving around perfectly to be able to avoid the enemy. Alright, so it looks like Tom here is going to try and use the WZ-111-5A against me, and it looks like my gun tower tried to launch in a shot, but it was unable to do so. And again, we can see that Wargaming's overlay really shows you just how badly modeled some of their ridge lines are. It looks like the whole of the top of that sand doesn't actually count as a bit of a hitbox. So I'm trying to aim for his weak point here. That looked like it was a green pen. Unfortunately, it wasn't to be. And our artillery looks like they miss another shell. So the 5A fluffs a shot, and as I'm firing heat, I feel like I could come around the corner and just fire up into his armor from that angle. Again, it wasn't to be. And I feel like even though I'm aiming okay in this situation, it's still not working out. So I decide to take over control of the Badger just to make sure it's in position. And then we can see the Badger manages to get a shot. Now we're going to fire up into the lower plate, use our medkit to get our driver back in. And in this situation, if I can turn him to the side, the Badger should do some work. And there we go. The Badger hits them. Looks like the watchtower hits them. And while Tom manages to get a shot in me from the WZ-111-5A, the Badger that I put up into that sniper's nest is actually doing very well. So it looks like Tom is feeling a little bit pressured in this situation as he's decided to push. And I just don't think he realized that the Badger was up here. I mean, it's such an obvious sniper location. And oh my word, like, it's bad enough to have a tank destroyer up there, let alone to have a Badger up there wailing down on your heavies. And I have to admit, jumping around, I was really starting to get into the zone here. You know, diving into the Badger, diving into the 277, going back and getting a shot in from the 430U, albeit missing, and thinking about who else should I go and take a look at. Well, why don't I... Yeah, well, like a hot knife through butter, hopefully. We can manage to get the back of this. Well, we can see the 277's trying to defend itself, but unable to be able to get the shot in. I then decide to use my 60 TP to go and get stuck into the fight as well, while my Badger just continues to wail on our opponents. The 430U on my team, after doing hero's work up on the western flank, finally gets shut down, and it looks like Tom's artillery barrage managed to come in from his MRL, but it doesn't look like it actually managed to do anything to the Badger. So we shut down the 113 with our Badger from the hill, and now assimilate the 60 TP or take it over to be able to finish off the final shot. And that's all my 60 TP did, all game, was put in that 700 damage. But there we go. Another great victory in the Art of Strategy game mode. So let's take a look at the results of our first game so we can get an idea of what tanks did well and specifically what kind of artillery pieces did well. Well, we can see that both flamethrowers did nothing. Maybe each strategist was not stupid enough to go and get ambushed by the flamethrowers, but they are still useful for holding key points. My AT guns did some serious work, 1,400 damage, and also picked up a couple of kills, and my MRL did nearly 2,000 damage in a kill. And then Red Max MRL on the enemy team did 2,300 damage, which was more than any of his vehicles. We can clearly see which one I was micromanaging at least the most of, right? And sure, it was the TVP, which I managed to do 6,400 damage. But I was quite happy that even tanks that I don't think I barely took over were still doing like 1,000 damage, showing you that Wargaming's AI, when it's allowed to just free farm with premium rounds, is still very solid. In our second game, which was against Marcelo, clearly showing that he is a very decent player of World of Tanks and gave me much more of a run for my money, we can see that Marcelo's MRL was not actually very effective, and our gun turret, apart from putting in that big crucial shot against the SW1, was not so useful. Our MG turret was kind of nice to try and possibly get me back into the fight when we were having our TVP versus the 430U duel, but still definitely not all that impactful. So it really is map dependent and position dependent. Let's take a look to see who the big performers were on my team. And of course, it was that TVP for getting in multiple mags, the Kranvang for getting in a single mag, the 430 for managing to get some shots in from the side, but oh my word, the Badger was the big boy with 4,600 damage dealt and 3 kills from the top of the hill. And we can see that also for Marcelo, his Badger also did a lot of work as well at 3,800. So would totally recommend to take a Badger in this game mode. I really think that those big TDs with great frontal armor will do fabulous stuff against the AI. And while, you know, it's nice to have a turret, I don't think that the AI is quite good enough to be thinking about tracking and getting the side of the TD and making fun of it. So all in all, the Art of Strategy is at a significant upgrade on the Order of War game mode that we saw on the Sandbox test server a year ago. Well, clearly Wargaming has done a little bit. Now you can play strategist versus strategist. There didn't feel like there were quite so many bugs. It did feel like it was a little bit smoother. There's different kinds of AI types that you can be able to assign to your units. But really, I feel like it's the same kind of thing from a year ago. And while there are undoubtedly some upgrades, if you truly hated playing Order of War last Sandbox test server in 2021, yeah, the Art of Strategy really isn't going to be the thing for you. For me, this is such a bizarre game mode. It really is an absolutely bizarre game mode to have going into World of Tanks, as far as I can tell, in the next update of 1.16.1. It's got so many logistical issues. Firstly, how are Wargaming going to monetize it? At the moment, they're enabling everyone to pick tanks. Will they eventually make it so that you can only pick vehicles that you have inside your garage? Is that what they're going to try and do to try and encourage people to grind up towards tier 10? Is it just a fun game mode that Wargaming are going to bring out for events? How are they going to adjust the economy of a game mode which is probably quite heavy on the computational power of their servers to also make them some money at the same time? And Wargaming is suggesting that the economy of the game mode during the common test is not final and will be further adjusted. Will we see the game mode eventually turn to you having to pay for the gold rounds you fire or the premium consumables that you use? Or is Wargaming just going to be putting this into the game as a fun mode to try and encourage people to keep playing World of Tanks and to give them something a little bit different to be able to break up the monotony? There's a couple of things that I'd like to conclude with this video. One is that when I was playing it, while it was oh so fun to be in control of everything, and for a lot of you lone wolves out there and you armchair generals who have always been thinking that you would have won if it wasn't for your terrible team, who's going to be left to blame when it's just you mano a mano against the enemy strategist and you're in control of the 7 vehicles? Will it be RNG that we all have to start blaming? The reason why I highlight this is because it did feel a little bit empty to be playing World of Tanks that's not in a multiplayer game. Believe it or not, it's kind of those interactions that you have with your team and their unpredictability, and when they surprise you and maybe even end up doing something that's really cool, that is, for me at least, a lot of the magic inside World of Tanks. Now, undoubtedly there are times where it's my team that's making me want to pull my hair out, but this truly did feel like a single player adventure. Of course, the other issues with the game mode is that the 1v1 strategist is not the only option. Of course, you can also play in the 7 versus 1 or the 1 versus 7 game mode, whichever the way you want to look at it, whether you want to just play against a strategist or you want to play as a strategist. And for me personally, I can't imagine that being very sustainable. I cannot imagine a lot of players really wanting to sign up to play against a load of bots, with having suddenly one of them gets assimilated by the strategist, and maybe it's going to surprise them and be able to fight back well. Alternatively, I also imagine there's probably going to be not many people who want to play 1 versus 7, especially when everybody starts to learn the maps and learn how all the defensive works and the different positions. Because as long as the 7 players are being aggressive and putting up pressure on all of the vehicles at the same time, they should easily be able to outplay the bots. The only time that the strategist is going to be able to win is if the enemy team are very passive, and then they're able to kind of win those micro engagements through taking over one of the vehicles, or if the enemy players are just really lackluster and they don't think about the defensive structures. All in all, this game mode is just so bizarre to me. I think it's really cool that Wargaming have been able to implement this. I just really wonder if people are going to end up playing it a lot, or if it's going to be like a lot of other game modes in World of Tanks that people only play because they want the rewards, or if it's going to end up like a lot of other Wargaming's additions to World of Tanks or within the World of Tanks genre, such as either the Rampage game mode, or alternatively something like World of Tanks Generals, which was a card-based game based on World of Tanks that lasted for, I think, months or at most like a year or two. So I'd be really interested to hear what you all have to say in the comments down below. Does this thing look absolutely amazing and you can't wait to jump in? How do you think the Wargaming are going to monetize this game mode? Or do you think it looks like something that maybe will be fun for an evening, but then you'll want to be jumping back into World of Tanks? Anyway, ladies and gents, boys and girls, that's it for today. Really hope you enjoyed this look at Art of Strategy. If you did and you liked this video, give it a thumbs up. If you hated it, however, give it a thumbs down. And if you want to test out this game mode yourself, you can download the 1.16.1 test server and give it a go. And as always, thank you so much for watching. You've been epic, and hopefully I'll see you soon.